Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the final meeting of the PSTE Subcommittee in this room. We are just going to jump right in. We have Jacob Cash, who is leading this effort for us for our decisions today. Jacob.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll be going by analyst order today in the document. They'll start with the first agency that they're assigned and work through the rest of their assignment so that they can get to the other subcommittees. Madeline, if you would start.
Sure. I'm going to start with the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy, which starts on page 20 of the white document or the white packet. Items 1 through 3 on pages 20 to 23 are DLS recommendations for reporting requirements related to the Victims of Crime Act or VOCA program, with one report being due August 1st and a report and a letter being due on November 1st. The agency disagreed and requested instead that one report be due on November 1st. I'll draw your attention to pages 6 and 7 of the green packet as an additional item, which would have there be one annual report due November 1st that describes each grant award, the total amount of grants, the total amount of unexpended funds, an identification of respective amount of funds for the purpose of direct provision of services administration and which went unobligated, and a comparison of aggregate level performance measures, which would be due November 1st.
Thank you, Madeline. So instead of, we recommended 3 actions. Is there a motion on the 3? Oh, I'm sorry. Would you like to accept or reject in the white packet in exchange for the green page?
Okay, well, we will reject and adopt the green page.
Thank you very much.
Right, did I say that right?
Is there a second? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to also take this opportunity to discuss the narrative that appears on page 8 of the green packet. So that is a report on invoice and payment methodology. This is narrative that would be due October 1st and asks or requires that the agency review its processes for collecting payments and making payments to grantees, for collecting information and making payments to grantees.
Motion to accept that.
Okay, then I'm going to go back to the white packet and flip to page 24 for action 4. This recommendation is to increase the turnover expectancy for 16 new positions to 25%. The agency concurred.
Motion to adopt.
Item 5, lower down on the page, would reduce the general fund appropriation for the state aid for police protection, enhancement funding to the level previously provided in fiscal 23 and 24. The agency disagreed and says that the SAP enhancement enables a great flexibility for local law enforcement agencies.
So in order to have gotten this 5 million, Madeline, it was taken from 2 other pots of money, correct?
Yes, the police accountability grant was changed from 8 million to 4 million, and the warrants and absconding mandate is changed from 2 million to 1 million. That action does not appear as associated with the agency because it's an item in the BRFAP.
Right. So I just want to make clear for everybody watching at home that this might appear to be a cut, but we are going to handle it in the larger committee. Senator Jackson, is there a motion?
Motion to adopt.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, just reiterating, adopting the cut, and we are going to address the 2 other funds in full committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
To keep going through the agency in budget code order, I'm going to ask that you now look at the green packet and see page, page 5. In addition to that action on the state aid for police protection, this language would require that a local law enforcement agency attest to GOCPP that their employees have completed training on juvenile interrogation requirements. A total of $5 million would be withheld across and that would be like prorated among the jurisdictions. Your motion.
Motion to adopt the green page.
Okay. Then item 6 on page 24. restricts $100,000 for the submission of the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board annual report. The agency concurs in part. They are happy to submit the report, but ask that funds not be withheld.
Motion to concur.
Okay, then in the white packet, I'm going to ask that you turn to page 77 for the Department of Juvenile Services. The first action withholds $50,000 of the appropriation for a report on out-of-home placement wait times. A similar report was requested last year. The agency concurred in part, but the department requests that funds not be withheld.
Madam Chair, motion to adopt or concur, but to change the date to January 15th, 2025.
Okay. And then we're going to turn to the next page for item 2. This restricts $100,000 for the purpose of general administration so that the department submits its next facilities master plan by the end of calendar 2024.
Motion to adopt.
There's an additional item for your consideration in the green packet on page 39. So second to last page. This is committee narrative that would have DJS report on the services it provides for youth in alternatives to detention. And that narrative would be due by July 1st.
Thank you, Marilyn. I thought we had a very healthy discussion in the subcommittee with the secretary, and they agreed that this is also a good exercise for us to adopt. Is there a motion?
Motion to adopt the green page 39.
Okay, now back to the white packet for the Department of State Police on page 79. The first action would reduce the general fund appropriation that was budgeted for the supplemental retirement account match. That funding is currently budgeted in the Department of Budget and Management. The agency disagrees and reports that it will this funding was purposely allocated in the spot and that it will reapportion the dollars in coordination with DBM and not use it for the supplemental retirement account match.
Okay, so we have a bit of double budgeting. Is there a motion?
Motion to adopt.
Okay,
Item number 2 further down that page would increase the turnover expectancy for 28 new positions to 25% for the licensing division.
okay.
The agency disagrees and asks that their funds not be that these funds not be removed as it plans to continuously hire.
Okay, so given especially recent attention in the audit, I would request that we move to reject this.
Motion to reject.
Thank you.
Item number 3 is narrative for quarterly reporting on the permitting applications that the licensing division receives. A similar report was requested in last year's budget. The agency concurred.
Motion to concur.
Then item number 4 would increase the turnover expectancy for 6 new positions to 25%, and those 6 positions would be for emergency dispatchers. The agency disagrees and reports that it will be continuously recruiting these positions.
Motion to reject.
Item number 5 is language that's added to the budget every year, which restricts funds pending the uniform crime report and also allows the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy to withhold a portion of the its quarterly SAP payments to jurisdictions who do not submit data to the department by November 1st.
Motion to concur.
Sorry, and I should have said that the agency concurred with that. Then there's one additional item for your consideration for the department on page 40 of the green packet, so the absolute back. This is narrative due July 1st that would have the department report on the capacity of its forensic laboratories and the expenditure associated with the laboratories and particular types of testing.
Motion to adopt green page 40.
Okay. I will now be moving to the next analyst.
Moving on to page 30 of the white packet. For the Department of Veterans Affairs, DLS recommends a committee narrative for a report requesting status on Charlotte Hall Veterans Home Facility, operations, staffing, and federal ratings. The agency concurs.
Motion to concur. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So on the white pages, the State Lottery and Gaming Control Agency, page 36. The agency concurs with the governor's allowance. On the green pages, page 12, DLS recommends for the Lottery and Gaming Control Agency to submit monthly reporting on sports wagering, with the first report to be published on July 5th, 2024, with subsequent reports published monthly on the 5th day of each month.
Motion to adopt the additional pages. Concur.
On page 13, the Lottery and Gaming Control Agency, DLS recommends for them to submit a report on problem gambling and for them to collaborate with the Maryland Center of Excellence on Problem Gambling and the Maryland Department of Health to submit a joint report on the programs and strategies each employs to address problem gambling. The report shall be submitted by December 11th, 2024.
Motion to adopt the additional pages.
And that concludes. Thank you.
We're now white packet again on page 26. This is the Maryland Thoroughbred Racetrack Operating Authority. The DLS recommendation is to concur. The agency concurred with that. Also on page 9 of the green packet is. Okay, sure.
So motion to concur.
Okay. On page 9 of the green packet is some narrative. What it does basically is has quarterly reports on the status of 3 of the racetracks, one in Bowie, one in Laurel, and one in Pimlico.
Motion to adopt the additional pages.
Okay. To page 1, please, for the judiciary. Several recommendations here. So the first is to reduce $5.6 million in general funds made for the purpose of operating expenses. And the Chief Justice is authorized to allocate the reduction across the judiciary. The agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
Okay. The second is a recommendation to reduce $8.8 million in general funds made for the purpose of employee merit increases, with the Chief Justice authorized to allocate this reduction across the judiciary. There is an alternative to this on page 1 of the green packet, which is provided that the reduction is $7,910,680 for the same purpose, with the same stipulation. The Chief Justice is authorized to allocate the reduction.
Madam Chair, make a motion to reject the white pages and adopt the DLS alternative.
Right. The third item is language provided that $500,000 in general funds made for the purpose of providing attorneys for required representation is reduced for fiscal 2025.
Motion to concur.
Going to page 2, still with the judiciary. Item number 4 restricts $8.75 million of the appropriation made for the purpose of providing attorneys for required representation at initial appearances, consistent with the decision in DeWolf versus Richmond. The agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
Number 5 is a recommendation to adopt narrative regarding the appointed attorney program costs and utilization. The agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
Number 6 is on page 3. This is a recommendation to adopt narrative requesting a report on annual court performance measures. The agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
Number 7 is the recommendation to adopt narrative requesting a report on problem-solving courts performance and funding. The agency concurs in part, having expressed concern with the funding recommendation for the report.
Motion to concur.
Item number 8 is a recommendation to adopt narrative regarding major information technology development project status report, and the agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
Page 4 for item number 9, which is a recommendation to adopt narrative regarding a report on the Land Records Improvement Fund balance, and the agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
Item number 10 is a recommendation to adopt narrative regarding judgeship needs for fiscal 2026. The agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
Item number 11, pardon me. Item number 11 is on page 5. And this is a recommendation to add language to the general fund appropriation, reducing $500,000 of the fiscal 2024 deficiency appropriation for the appointed attorney program in the judiciary. The agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
Item number 12 is language for the same purpose, which makes item number 11 technical for the purpose of item number 12, and the agency similarly concurs.
Motion to concur.
Jacob, before we move on from the judiciary, just for folks watching at home, we plan on taking up the issue of private home detention monitoring funding in full committee. Okay, thank you.
Alrighty, we will next please turn to page 6 for the Office of the Public Defender. The first recommendation is to add language reducing just over $1.7 million in general funds, $386 in special funds, and $9,852 in federal funds to align with increased turnover expectancy among existing positions at the agency. The agency disagrees with this recommendation.
Okay, I believe there's a color page, green page.
Yeah, I'm just gonna.
Okay, thank you.
The second recommendation is to reduce the appropriation by an additional $816,719 in general funds to align with increased turnover expectancy among new positions. And you do have, it's a loose page, an alternate action, which adds language provided that $2,521,233 in general funds, $386 in special funds, and $9,852 in federal funds of the appropriation made for the purpose of salaries and wages in the Office of the Public Defender may not be expended for that purpose, but instead may be used only to increase salaries for existing positions.
Okay, so I think we heard from the public defender pretty clearly that part of the challenge with our vacancy rate and effectiveness of that office is ensuring competitive salaries and compensation for her staff. This is, I believe, the subcommittee's attempt to help alleviate that pressure.
Absolutely. So, Madam Chair, if I might, would vote to reject the white pages and vote for a motion to accept the alternative or the green page document.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to clarify that's
Yes.
a rejection of number 1 and
Number
number
one,
2.
I'm sorry.
And two.
And two,
And two.
number 1
One
and
and
2. Yeah.
Thank you.
And adopting a green page.
Adopting the green page.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the third recommendation for the Office of the Public Defender is a recommendation to adopt narrative regarding a hiring, separation, and caseloads report, and the agency concurs with this.
Motion to concur.
We next turn to page 7 for the Office of the Attorney General. The first recommendation is to add language reducing the appropriation by $984,763 in general funds, $223 in special funds, and $5,692 in federal funds to align with increased turnover expectancy. The agency disagrees with this recommendation.
Thank you, Jacob, for the recommendation. I think we heard from the Attorney General loud and clearly, though, that he is staffing up. And so we want to give him the opportunity to do that. So I would ask the subcommittee to reject this recommendation.
Motion to reject.
Okay.
The second recommendation is to adopt narrative requesting quarterly reports on the Access to Counsel and Evictions program from the Maryland Legal Services Corporation. There is an alternate action, again, on a loose page for these same reports, but with 3 added items. The total number of evictions averted, the number of tenants seeking counsel more than once for the same property, and the number of tenants seeking counsel more than once for different properties.
So Madam Chair, I would seek a motion to reject the white page and to adopt the additional green page.
To page 9 for the Office of the State Prosecutor, please. The recommendation is to concur with the governor's allowance. The agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
Page 10, please, for the Maryland Tax Court. Recommendation is to concur with the governor's allowance. The agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
And then to page 33, please, for the Office of Administrative Hearings. And the recommendation is to concur with the governor's allowance, and the agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll begin on page 27 of your white packet for the Maryland Department of Planning. The DLS recommendation was to delete $250,000 in general funds budgeted for the Maryland 250 Commission in fiscal 2025, given approximately $450,000 appropriated in prior years for this purpose. The agency disagreed with this recommendation, and there is a related additional item on page 10 of your green packet. So this item would in effect reject the DLS recommendation, and it would add language provided that half of this appropriation, $125,000, must be used for the department to administer grants to local and municipal organizations for this purpose, and then $125,000 to keep for the purpose as intended.
Thank you, Carrie. So I'm aware of a number of local efforts to also help amplify and celebrate Maryland's 250. And I would ask that we reject the DLS recommendation and instead adopt green page number 10.
A motion to reject and adopt the additional page.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to turn to the Motor Vehicle Administration, which begins on page 49 of your white packet. The DLS recommendation on page 49 is to concur with the governor's allowance, and the agency concurred. And I would draw your attention to two items of committee narrative, which is in the green packet on page 16 and 17. The first item is committee narrative, asking the department to submit a report on improper out-of-state tags where Maryland residents are not complying with the statutory regulation to change their tags within 60 days and are driving with out-of-state tags as state residents.
Madam Chair, if I
Yes,
might,
please.
so I want to first make a motion to concur with the initial point and then to adopt this additional page.
I think this is something we're going to have to dig into in future years and future budgets. And so I think the study is going to be a really healthy look into the problem. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you. And the second item for MVA is on page 17 of your green packet. And this has to do with the solvency of the Maryland Automobile Insurance Fund uninsured division. Essentially, we'd like MVA and MIA to take a look at the uninsured motorist fee and assess the adequacy of it and relation to what other states are doing on this issue to make sure that folks are sufficiently motivated to get automobile insurance.
Make a motion to adopt the green page.
Okay, just a bit of editorializing. I believe there is legislation pending on this very issue, so we might have to change up our plan midway through the budget, but I think this is a healthy backstop. Thank you.
Next page on your white packet, page 50, is MDOT PAYGO Capital. The DLS recommendation was to concur with the governor's allowance, and the agency concurred.
Motion to concur.
Page 51 on the white packet is the operating budget for the Maryland Transit Administration. The DLS recommendation is to add language requiring the agency to provide bi-monthly construction update reports on the Purple Line Light Rail project and withholding $100,000 until they submit those reports. The agency concurred in part. They are happy to continue providing the reports, but would prefer that it is a narrative item, not withholding funding rather than language. And so occurringly, there is on page 18 of your green packet, committee narrative requesting the same information, just not tying up the funding.
Madam Chair, I would recommend or make a motion to reject the recommendation and then adopt the additional page.
There is an additional page on page 19 of your green packet for the Maryland Transit Administration. This is an item that would add language to the special fund appropriation. This would withhold $250,000 from MDOT MTA and an additional $250,000 from MDOT, the Secretary's office, pending a report on the impacts of fall service changes to the CityLink Brown and Local Link 33 bus routes. So this language includes an assessment of how those fall changes would impact certain populations, as well as a summary and some information regarding how these fall service changes occur each year and how the outreach is reaching those impacted communities.
Madam Chair, I vote to make a motion to adopt the green page, number 19.
Moving on in your white packet, page 52 is the Maryland Transit Administration PAYGO capital side. The DLS recommendation is to concur with the governor's allowance and the agency concurred.
Motion to concur.
On page 53 of your white packet is the Maryland Aviation Administration. DLS recommendation is to concur with the governor's allowance and the agency concurred.
Motion to concur.
Page 54 of your white packet is the Aviation Administration PAYGO capital budget. DLS recommendation is to concur with the governor's allowance and the agency concurred.
Motion to concur.
Page 55 of your white packet is the Maryland Transportation Authority. There's no DLS recommendation as this is a non-budgeted agency and the agency concurred.
Motion to concur.
Page 56 of your white packet is the Maryland Transportation Authority PAYGO capital. Again, this is a non-budgeted agency and the agency concurred.
Motion to concur.
And skipping ahead in your white packet to page 76 for the Maryland Environmental Service. The DLS recommendation is to adopt narrative, which is similar to the narrative from last year, asking the agency to provide a funding statement just to really complete their financial picture so that we can see how they are spending and the revenues that they're generating, and the agency concurred.
Motion to concur.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Starting on page 28 for the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. The first item is committee narrative requesting a report on activity related to the Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund, and the agency concurred.
Motion to concur.
The second item on page 29, also committee narrative requesting a report on activity related to the state and local cybersecurity grant program, and the agency concurred.
Motion to concur.
Then moving to page 31 for the Maryland Automobile Insurance Fund. This is committee narrative requesting quarterly financial statements for both the insured and uninsured divisions. The agency concurred in part, requesting a shifting out of the due dates from the original being July 15th, October 15th, January 15th, 2025, and April 15th, 2025, and they request to shift these out to July 31st, 2024, October 31st, 2024, March 15th, 2025, and May 15th, 2025.
Motion to modify and accept the agency's request for new deadlines.
Then moving to page 32, Maryland Insurance Administration. The first is a committee narrative requesting a report on the status of the Insurance Tracking System, or ITS, development project, and the agency concurred.
Motion to concur.
Then moving to page 34 for the Comptroller of Maryland. The first item is a technical correction for double budgeted employee health insurance, and the agency concurred.
Motion to concur.
The second item is committee narrative requesting submission of both tax year and fiscal year data in next year's managing for results data submission, and the agency concurred.
Motion to concur.
Then there is an additional item on page 11 of the green packet. Committee narrative requesting a 5-year plan for adding staff and technology resources and estimated additional revenue resulting from these additions.
Thank you, Samantha. I think we heard loud and clear from the comptroller that there is a lot of realized tax revenue out there and she needs the tools to realize it. And I think this is a healthy report for all of us to be on the same page to get to that goal.
Yes, motion to accept the additional green.
Okay.
Then looking at ATC, Alcohol, Tobacco and Cannabis Commission on page 35. This action committee narrative requesting the addition of managing for results measures for cannabis sales violations in next year's managing for results submission. And the agency concurred in part, noting that because of legal action in Washington County, preventing them from fully investigating cannabis violations, the data may not be complete as submitted next year.
With that understanding, we concur. Motion to concur.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'll start on page 13 with a subsequent injury fund. The DLS recommendation is to concur with the governor's allowance and the agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
Turning to the next page, page 14, the uninsured employers fund. DLS recommends restricting $150,000 of UEF's administrative budget until the Office of Legislative Audits has confirmed that each of the agency's repeat audit findings has been corrected, and the agency concurs with this recommendation.
Motion to concur.
There's also an additional page for your consideration. It's page 4 of the green packet. This narrative would direct UEF and the Workers' Compensation Commission to form a work group to study and make recommendations regarding UEF's long-term financial solvency.
Motion to accept.
Okay. Turning back to page 15 in the white packet, the Workers' Compensation Commission. DLS recommends concurring with the governor's allowance and the agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
Thank you.
All right, in the main packet, page 16 is the Chesapeake Bay overview. It is non-budgeted. The agency concurs with that.
Motion to concur.
Page 57 starts the Department of Natural Resources. First recommendation there is for a report in the Office of Outdoor Recreation's reporting in terms of its metrics. The agency concurred in part. They note that they are going to be submitting a report already June 30th, 2024.
Motion to adopt.
Moving on to page 58, recommendation number 2 is a Chesapeake Bay overview recommendation that's showing up in the Department of Natural Resources budget. This is for the summary of Chesapeake Bay restoration spending. The agency concurs.
Motion to adopt.
All right, on page 59, recommendation number 3 is also a Chesapeake Bay overview recommendation that shows up in the Department of Natural Resources budget for historical and projected Chesapeake Bay restoration spending report. The agency concurred in part. They would like to scale back the scope of the requested report.
Motion to adopt the request.
Moving now to page 60, recommendation number 4 concerns the Chesapeake and Atlantic Coastal Bay 2010 Trust Fund annual work and expenditure plan. So their plans are required in statute. This is narrative to kind of remind them to provide that information. The agency concurred that they'll continue to provide the report.
Motion to adopt.
Moving now to the additional pages, we'll go to first page for KOOA. That starts on page 21. This is for a report on consideration of the mentored hunt program when people are doing an easement with the Department of Natural Resources in terms of the program open space or rural legacy program. So it'll be narrative for October 1, 2024.
Motion to adopt.
Then on page 22, this is narrative for a cultural and historical resources preservation plan for the entirety of the Department of Natural Resources in terms of all its managed lands. So it'd be a December 1, 2024 report.
Motion to adopt. Thank you.
Then there is on page 23, there's report requirement for recreational striped bass reporting, and then a task force that was kind of associated a couple of years with recreational fish data collection and licensing. That would be December 1, 2024 report.
Motion to adopt.
There is a single standalone page. This concerns the Merkel Wildlife Sanctuary Management Plan. This would be to optimize the Canada geese wintering. Concern here is that the Canada geese the property was originally intended to be used for hunting purposes. This report would ask the Department of Natural Resources to develop a plan to really get at that Canada geese overwintering issue. It's October 1, 2024 report.
Motion to adopt. Thank you.
All right, back in the main decision document on page 62, the Maryland Department of Agriculture. First recommendation there is to reduce funding, for a turnover reduction. The agency disagreed, noting that there are already positions filled, and it looks like the reduction would probably be a lot less than reflected here.
Motion to reject.
Second recommended action is to reduce funding for the Weights and Measures program by $470,000 in general funds. The concern here was that there was additional special funds being brought into the appropriation that I couldn't determine the source for that funding. Therefore, it looked like they had excess funding. In addition, they have a bill in to increase the fees that would bring in additional revenue. They report, though, that it's money coming from balance for important work they're doing in machines, that they're the equipment they need, and that the fee bill would not actually bring in revenues until fiscal 2026.
Madam Chair, motion to reject.
The bottom of page 62, the recommendation there is for a report on the status and future of value-added agriculture in Maryland that would come in October 1, 2024. The agency does concur in part. They're not keen on the Salisbury University kind of business and economic and community outreach network kind of reporting, which potentially you could just kind of strike that on page 63, where it would just say updated information on the jobs and total economic impact of value-added agriculture, and then full stop at that point and just pull out the requirement for that university report.
Or community outreach network of Salisbury.
It's just folks following at home, we're just removing the reference to Salisbury University, but still requiring the report. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you.
On the bottom of page 63, recommendation number 4 is to delete funding for the nuisance insects, black fly, and midge treatment program. The idea here is that there's a consent decree that's going to provide $1.9 million for the Back River and Patapsco watersheds. So that funding potentially could ameliorate the need for funding for the midges, at least, not for the black flies. So it's a $137,500 general fund and special fund reduction. The agency disagrees, noting that that funding will certainly not help outside of the Back River watershed.
Reject.
Second.
Moving now to the additional pages in your packet. First one is on page 24. This is for a report on blue catfish marketing that would come in December 1, 2024.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Or adopt, I'm sorry.
Then on page 25, there's a report, similar report to what we talked about for the Department of Natural Resources in terms of the mentored hunt program participants being encouraged to, the easement holders being through agricultural easements being encouraged to do work with the mentored hunt program participants.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
All right, moving back to your decision document again on page 73. This is the Maryland Department of the Environment. The first recommendation there is to restrict $200,000 until the submission of the annual scrap tire report. The agency disagreed, noting that they'll continue to submit the report in a timely manner. If you guys are inclined, you could give some leeway here, give them a year to kind of prove that they're going to provide the report at the right time. So it's on page 38 of your color page packet, there is a Maryland Used Tire Cleanup and Recycling Fund annual report narrative instead of language. No money will be restricted. It'd just be narrative for purposes of that report.
Madam Chair, reject the decision document and adopt the additional page on 38.
Bottom of page 73, recommendation number 2 is to restrict $200,000 until the submission of the correct budgeting of personnel expenditures within the Maryland Department of the Environment. The agency disagrees, noting that they're kind of changing their system to kind of accommodate this and that they currently have to do this information manually.
Motion to adopt. Oh,
Okay, I'm going to agree with this, and just to MDE, we appreciate it, but we want to make sure we get this right moving forward, and it's been a couple of years, so thank you.
On page 74, recommendation number 3 is for the enforcement inspection position strength assessment report that's coming in for a couple of years now. The agency disagrees, noting that they do provide this information in a separate report.
Is there a motion?
motion to adopt.
Okay, thank you.
Moving now to the additional color pages here. on page 37. This first piece of narrative would be for a timeline for the environmental triggers development and go live date for the environmental accident text alert system. So that was narrative that you guys requested last year, but the next step isn't really needed in terms of understanding where they're going with this.
Motion to adopt.
Then on page 38, there's discussed already. And now we will go to a singles page, standalone page. This is the Maryland State Certified SOD Standard Enforcement Report. So that would be a December 1, 2024 report to get at that issue that apparently there are certain development projects in the state that are not using Maryland State Certified SOD.
Motion to adopt.
Okay, back in your white packet on page 37, we'll do the rest of the MDOT decisions. On page 37, the recommended action is annual budget bill language requiring notification of capital budget changes. The agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
On page 39, in the Secretary's office, the first recommendation is for annual budget bill language for operating grants, limiting them to the amount budgeted. The agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
Turning to page 40, the PAYGO for the Secretary's office, annual budget bill language requiring notification of changes to capital program. The agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
On page 41 is the operating grant for WMATA. The recommendation was to concur with the governor's allowance. The agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
On page 42, the PAYGO grant for WMATA. The recommendation was to concur with the governor's allowance. The agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
Turning now to debt service requirements for MDOT. On page 43 is a modified annual budget bill language. It sets debt limits for both consolidated transportation bonds, which are traditional debt, and non-traditional debt. The modification is in prior years, there's always been an ability of the department to come back for non-traditional debt and increase the amount authorized with subject to notification to the budget committees. This simply applies that same ability to the consolidated transportation bond debt. The recommendation is concurred with by the agency.
Motion to concur.
On page 45, the second recommendation for debt service requirements is annual language requiring 2 reports. The agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
Turning now to the State Highway Administration on page 46, the recommendation is to concur with the governor's allowance on the operating.
Motion to concur.
And just in case anybody's looking for it, there is a PAYGO item, but it involves the BRFA, and that the full committee will be taking that up. So turning now to page 47, for the Maryland Port Administration, the recommendation on the operating was concur with the governor's allowance. The agency concurred. We do have a color page on page 15 that asks for, expresses intent of the committees on the Howard Street Tunnel project, that the project be moved forward expeditiously, and that it acknowledges it's a complex project with lots of people involved, all levels of government, and just expresses that the project again move forward expeditiously so the schedule doesn't slip and costs don't increase for that.
Thank you. First, Madam Chair, a motion to concur the initial, and then a motion to adopt the additional page.
And then finally for me on page 48, the PAYGO version for the port is to concur with the governor's allowance, and the agency concurs.
Motion to concur. Thank you.
That's it for that. So it looks like
Same question. Okay, well, yep. First, let's go to my items. So we can start with the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services on page 64 of the white packet. For this item, DLS recommended restricting funds pending a report for a plan to comply with the Public Information Act, and the agency concurred.
Motion to concur.
On the page 65, the second recommended action from DLS was the Annual Justice Reinvestment Act report, and the agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
On page 66, recommended action number 3 is the annual report on recidivism, and the agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
Number 4 is an update on the correctional program participation measures request from last year, and the agency concurs.
Motion to concur.
On page 67, there's the recommendation to provide notification within 14 days of providing the correctional, medical, and mental health care contracts, or the pretrial medical and mental health care contracts before the Board of Public Works. The agency concurred in part, agreeing to submit the information, but suggested that they would be limited in doing so until 7 days before the Board of Public Works meeting.
Madam Chair, I'd modify this, make a motion to modify and have the due date to move that to 7 days prior to the BPW meeting.
Thank you. And I believe we are optimistic this will be resolved before we even adjourn session, but just in case. Okay, thank you.
Moving on to corrections on page 68, DLS recommended adopt or restricting funds for the annual quarterly hiring and attrition reports. The agency concurs.
I'm sorry, that was closing my phone. So motion to concur. So, sorry, thank you.
On page 69, oh, sorry, actually for back with corrections, the color page packet. So let me, sorry. We can start with the one by itself. So there's a single page for corrections. This is an updated report that was requested last year, but this time with more information for information of transgender individuals in DPSCS custody.
Motion to adopt.
On page, oh, actually there was, yeah, I missed one. So on page 26 of the color page packet, there is this language restricts funds pending a report on apprenticeships and expanding those apprenticeships to help solve the labor shortages.
Motion to adopt.
Then on the next page, this action would restrict $200,000 pending a plan to eliminate the use of mandatory overtime, as well as additional information on overtime.
Motion to adopt.
Now going back to, or no. Well, this next, yeah. So on page 29, there is a committee narrative piece that would request the department provide a lot of information related to racial discrimination and retaliation related to an ongoing U.S. District Court lawsuit.
Motion to adopt.
And then on page 31, there is recommended committee, or not, there is committee narrative that would ask for more information on the reentry passport program. And this is building off the report from last year.
Motion to adopt.
I'm now going back to the decision document. On page 69 of the white packet, the first recommended action for community supervision was to adopt a caseload report, which has been annually requested, and the agency concurs. There is a color page on page 35 that would add some requests to that caseload report. So you may want to reject the DLS recommendation and take that color page.
Madam Chair, make the motion to reject the DLS recommendation and adopt the additional page on 35.
Next, on page 69, there is the report on assessment tools. To remind everybody, the DPP is changing the assessment tools they're using to determine risk classification.
Madam Chair, make a motion to modify and move the due date to September.
Then on page 71 of the white packet, for the Police and Correctional Training Commissions, DLS recommended concurring with the governor's allowance and the agency concurred. There is a color page or a color page for your consideration on page 36 of the color page packet that would increase or that would restrict funding $100,000 until there is a plan with specific timelines for spending the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission's fund.
Madam Chair, first I want to do a motion to concur and then to a motion to adopt the additional page.
Great. Yep, and then so finally there on page 72, there's the Division of Pretrial Detention and Services. DLS recommended concurring and the agency concurred.
Motion to concur.
I think the other analysts. Yeah, there's two other analysts that I think are still tied up in other meetings, so I will go back and handle their items. We begin on page 11 with the Public Service Commission of the decision document white packet. DLS recommended concurring, the agency concurred. There is, however, additional pages for your consideration in the packet, starting with page 2.
Yeah, with a motion to concur and a motion to adopt the additional pages.
So that would be page 2
Two
and
and
page 3.
Pages 2 and 3, yes, thank you.
I'm not missing anything. So for the Office of the People's Counsel on page 12 of the decision document, DLS recommended to concur and the agency concurred.
Motion to concur.
I'm gonna make sure I'm not missing anything as I go through here. Page 17 is the Maryland Energy Administration. DLS recommended adopting committee narrative on the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, revenue spending and fund balance, and the agency concurred.
Motion to concur.
Page 18, for recommended action number 2, DLS recommended narrative on the federal grants available for MEA to use from the IIJA and IRA.
Motion to concur.
Page 19, recommended action number 3 is for additional narrative on the usage of strategic energy investment bonds transferred to the dedicated purpose account. The agency concurred. Moving to page 25 for the Maryland Cannabis Administration, DLS recommended concurring with the governor's allowance and the agency concurred.
Motion to concur.
I think that was everybody, but I'm going to do one last check. Looks to me like we did not miss anything. So we're all good to go.
Okay, is there a motion on the report as a whole?
Motion to accept report, adopt the report.
Okay, all those in favor?
All right.
All right, wonderful work. And thank you, Jacob.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we're adjourned.